BBC Radio 1.
Night with Annie Nightingale.
Right there, right here.
Good evening, I'm Zane Lowe and welcome to A Night with Annie Nightingale on BBC Radio 1. Coming up this evening, from 9 p.m, we head to Maida Vale for the 4 decades celebration. Artists performing include Fatboy Slim, Tinchy Strider, Sub Focus, I Blame Coco, Professor Green, Booker Shea, Freestylers, DC Breaks, and Primal Scream. From midnight, it's the Decade Mixes, the greatest music played by any of the 4 decades on BBC Radio 1. From 2 a.m, we celebrate the best of guest mixes from the legendary show. But right now, welcome to the story of Annie Nightingale.
She's not afraid to play new music and anything that floats her boat.
You can't play this on the radio. Get off.
She's an oddity, a delightful one.
Was that psychedelic art happened at the
Getting intellectual at lunchtime. You can't fake passion, and she's full of it.
I think that's why she liked me and Ian Dury, because we were odd. We didn't fit in.
Well, he wasn't married at the time, but I was.
She was the first cool person I knew that moved to Brown. She set it up.
I mean, that kind of shaped British music, really.
Now the DJs were the key.
She's quite literally a party queen with the royal stamp of approval.
First up, best dressed, and always one of the last to leave. Let's put it that way, yeah?
We actually couldn't keep up with it. What do you mean you have to sleep? There's music out there to be enjoyed. There's music out there to be enjoyed. There's music out there to be enjoyed.
So, hand on heart, this is one of the most honoured and privileged interviews that I've ever had the opportunity to do. And today I get to talk to unarguably one of the most influential and important radio DJs of all time. For 4 decades, this lady has dedicated her life to musicians, their music, and the fans who love them. She's the perfect conduit between both worlds, and she's soundtracked lives and helped to build and maintain long creative careers. She's made many, many friends, she's made a few enemies, and she's earned unparalleled respect for her commitment to new music. She was Radio 1's first ever female DJ. She joined the station in 1970. She remained the only female DJ for 12 years, and she's partied with the best of them, from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones to the Mondays to the Chems. She supported hundreds of artists just when they were starting out, and many have gone on to become absolutely massive. You've heard of David Bowie, you've heard of Daft Punk, they've heard of Annie Nightingale. Some of the most experienced ears in the business, tireless in their quest to champion new genres, sounds and scenes on the radio, and over the next 2 hours, we're going to hear a very special documentary on Annie's life and career. We're going up close and personal, Annie, with an interview with yourself. There'll be interviews from many people that you know, Manny from Stone Roses and Primal Scream, Andrew Weatherall, Adam Freeland, Alex Patterson, New Orb, Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, and the legendary Pete Townsend from The Who. We've also asked Annie to select some music from the last 40 years that have made the biggest impact on her life. This is the story of Annie Nightingale. It's nice to see you. How are you?
Well, that was quite an intro.
That's it. That's all I've got prepared. In fact, that's pretty much the story right there.
I've got a lot to live up to now.
You've done the living up to that.
Do you think so?
And continually so. You have contributed so much to music, and music has really been the single biggest driving factor in your life, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it always that way?
Yeah. First word I can never remember trying to say, which I couldn't say, was I used to say music. I was trying to say music. Honestly, that's the first. So, I think it was set there and then.
We have so much to cover, and I'm so looking forward to this, Annie, because I can't wait for the stories. I can't wait to hear them firsthand. But we're going to sort of start with something that's more recent, because I think it's important that people remember that throughout your career, you made some of your boldest statements in recent years. The last summer sunrise party, the tower shows. Only you could have come up with those. Only you could have come up with the idea of going up towers that no mere mortal is allowed to enter and broadcast from them. You did it over 3 years. 040506, bringing some of your favourite breaks, DJs and musicians up there to hang out.
The last summer sunrise party with Annie Nightingale, live from the BBC Tower, London, on Radio 1.
Hi and welcome to the top of the BT Tower in London. We're live right through till 7 o'clock this morning. It's Annie Nightingale. If you want to be part of this show, and I really want you to be, then I want you to text me on 81199.
When did this genius idea pop into your head? What was the spark for this?
I said exactly where we are in Radio 1. We are down the street from the BT Tower, which is a very, very iconic building, as we all know. Yeah. When I was doing Saturday Night Show from 4 till 7, so I'd come out of Radio 1 at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning and see this building and imagine, and because that's where all the radio is beamed out from, our Radio 1 and whatever, BBC, all over the world. And I thought, why aren't we at the top of that building? Because I know that at the top of that building there used to be a revolving restaurant, and you can get up there, but it's banned, it's not allowed. I want to do a show from the top of that tower as the sun rises over London. How would that be? And so that's what we tried to do. It took 3 years of organising. The BT Tower people were very corporate, and we said, let's do a show from the top of the tower. And then I made the big mistake of using the word party. And they went,
it's like putting musician on your passport, isn't it? So for all sorts of trouble.
I said, we can't do that. No, not what? The middle of the night? All through? Oh, absolutely not. I went, no, sorry. No, didn't say the party. Historic broadcast. So they went, oh, okay, well, we'll have to think about that.
The top of the BT Tower looks like the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz. It's going to inspire Hyper. I used to go and see him DJing at a tiny breaks night in a basement on Sunday nights, not very far from here, actually. Now he's here on top of the world. Please, will you welcome and bring it on, DJ Hyper.
I'm DJ Hyper and Guy, formerly of Waxworks. She just asked me to play, and it was just such a random thing and brilliant thing to be doing, you know. I think there was only about 30 people up there, 30, maybe 40. It wasn't a big dance floor, and everyone, you know, it was a sort of a social with people DJing in the background in this fantastic, amazing setting of looking out over London. My girlfriend at the time, as the sun was coming up, she had her head against the window, staring out over the sunrise of London. And I went to her, oh, that's fantastic, isn't it? And she wasn't looking at it until she'd just fallen asleep.
Just a little strip right over Canary Wharf, so the sunrise may be starting. We're getting really excited about it. Right, if you want to email me.
On the day, it was stunning. But, you know, you're looking out over, it's all windows all the way around, and you can't see much to see the lights of Canary Wharf and London. A bit like when if you fly into Los Angeles at night, and it's just lights and lights and, you know, sort of street lights forever. So it looks a bit like that. But then the dawn comes up, and then the sun came up, and it's like a big egg. It's like boom, and it was really all around, brilliantly, very, very bright. Blindingly bright, extraordinary, and just at the right moment.
We are actually witnessing a most beautiful sunrise over London. We didn't dare believe this could happen, to be really honest with you.
And then as we finished the show, this was the extraordinary thing, it all went very biblical, because as we went back down, there's a very fast lift right down, back down to the ground. So in that time, as we came out of the building from the ground level and looked up, this big cloud had appeared from North London and literally swathed the BT Tower in cloud. So it was disappeared. You couldn't see anything. And if we'd been at the top, we wouldn't have been able to see anything either. So literally, within 10 minutes, the whole thing would have been a whiteout. So, you know, that was all very strange and mad. And of course, it'd take months of planning. And so Radio 1 said, oh, that was good. That would do it every year from a different tower.
Careful what you wish for.
Wow.
Hello there, we are in a giant silver disco ball in the sky, high above Berlin, making as much noise as we like because we're 200 metres above the earth. It's the Berlin TV Tower, a bit like the BT Tower in London, but higher off the ground.
I did do a recce to the one in Shanghai. Wow. And that is fantastic because they've got a pink bubble at the top, which would be so brilliant to do a broadcast net. So one day, and you've got to get the time right, and it's a very complicated matter, but it was
a brilliant idea.
It was an insane idea, but you know, why not?
A Night with Annie Nightingale.
BBC Radio 1.
My name is Goldie. I've been running Metalhead's music for 15 years. Which supported us back in the 90s. I mean, you know, we were getting dragged out of certain radio stations. I was getting dragged out by security just trying to get a certain person to play Angel, which now sounds like a normal pop record. And it was outrageous. The whole album, timeless. I mean, you know, she picked up on that. If you would have had people to play it, they'd have been dead in the water.
I'm Pete Townsend, most famous for my work with The Who. I seem to remember she played Quadrophenia somehow in its entirety. I think she managed to do it by playing it very, very late, and that was incredibly important. Much, much further down the line, I put out Psychoderelict, which was a solo album in the early 90s, which was actually a radio drama with songs on it.
My name is Spinner. Athena, the controller of the life experience grid, is neglecting her job.
I remember her calling me up and saying, you know, I'm playing one of these tracks, and I was thinking, bloody hell, you know, she's playing a kind of a rap song. And realising then that she wasn't pigeonholing me in the way that other people were, which was kind of, you can't do this beat. You know, you're in the Who, you have to go yagadang with the guitar, and the drums have to go budda 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 budda, and Roger Daltrey has to go ah. Otherwise, it's not a Who record.
Yo, what's going on? I am Professor Green. My album came out this year on July 19th. It was my debut album, Alive Till I'm Dead. Annie's actually played nearly every track off the album, actually. One of her favourites is a track called Jungle, which is... It's got a heavy dubstep influence. It's produced by Blue Bear from the True Tiger Camp and features Maverick Sabre. I met her for the first time backstage at one of Lily's shows last year when I was touring with Lily. Then she asked me to do a gig at Glastonbury, one of the opening parties at the Pussy Parlour, and there was a good few thousand people outside that couldn't even get in. It was crazy. It was definitely an eventful gig. The power went. There's footage of it on YouTube. I'm like 30 seconds into my first song and then the power goes, but it really helped to just build the vibe, you know. When they got the power back on, the atmosphere was electric. It was one of the best shows I've done. The crowd was just nuts.
BBC Radio 1 at Glastonbury.
You ready, Glastonbury?
You'll never be mine.
Just be good to me.
Just be good to me.
Just be good to me. All I need is a woman to be good to me. I'm an easy man. I'm easily pleased, and you provide me with everything that I need. Look, you know I make ends meant to hold on to yours. We're spending mine. No, you try, never let you buy. But if I was broke, would you still be spending time? Yes, and I believe you would. Don't be pleased to treat you good. I walk the street with you, talk deep with you, even sleep and spend all week with you. Then I'm off. You need some putting into the comments. Stop, but one thing is not ever important. What? Would you rather me be like? I ain't never gonna change it. You ever gonna realize? Look, people always gonna talk, babe. I ain't even gonna lie, but it ain't like you don't know what mine is. No,
just be good to me.
I'll try, and try, and try. Look, babe, you know I am. What's crooked as I'll be as good as I can. I'll try and try. Though it's evident my angel face is disguised for the devil inside. But good to me, I ain't good to girls. Me, I'm a bad boy, something every good girl needs. Hey, honestly, could have bring all your attention, but I'm a naughty boy and I always have been. What? And that ain't changing anytime soon. Corner with me whenever I move, whatever I do, I come back to you. See the good attract me and the crooked track. You, yeah. We all got our ways. Remember I saw through the course it was game. I can all when it came. Now she got me cutting off limbs like I'm trying to sort of change.
Always talk about.
Can I see some hands in the air, Glastonbury? Keep 'em up, man.
Nightingale.
BBC Radio 1.
This all began, this crazy ride began for you in the 60s when you were at journalism college, and you obviously had a real passion for music and were driving towards doing music journalism. And before you joined Radio 1, you got a chance to meet lots of musicians and become a part of circles of creativity. And tell us a little bit about that time and how you got to know some of these people who have since become household names.
Well, I started as a journalist, and I had a music column. So I was reviewing records, which is great because you got free records. And obviously I was not an expert, but gaining experience, really. I was living in Brighton, and everyone came on tour to Brighton. They still do. It's a major town full of young people, and so I'd kind of get to interview these guys. And I was quite surprised the record companies would say, would you like to interview this as a big star or something? I thought, I'm just such a sort of meaningless little junior reporter. I was really quite surprised. But I didn't realise then that the power of the press went all around the country. It was important to get interviews in local papers as well as the national. So we did count. Because I was literally on the crest of this wave that happened in the 60s, and it was just unstoppable. It was just so exciting, and I just felt I've got to be part of all this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now, if I'd been able to sing, I would have been a singer. A spelled name like Nightingale, very embarrassing not to do if you can't sing. If I could have, I got a guitar, tried to learn a guitar, I wanted to play bass, I wanted to be in a band. And I really wasn't, I wasn't good enough and having the confidence. And so I started managing a band. And so I got this band signed. And at the time there was a show on called Ready, Steady, Go. It was very, very seminal, brilliant TV show.
Well, hi there. This is Keith Fordyce welcoming you to a very special edition of Ready, Steady, Go. For those of you who don't know this show, I might say that each week we invite all sorts of pop singers along here to Studio 9 in Kingsway, London, and the crowd who come in get a chance to meet their stars close to. Well, each week...
The band was called Peter and the Headlines. Or Countdown and the Zeros, they were also called as well.
That's good.
So I knew that there's this woman called Vicky Wickham who was the editor of Ready, Steady, Go, and she was very friendly with Dusty Springfield.
Billy Ray was a preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along.
So one Sunday night, Dusty Springfield was playing in Brighton, and on impulse, I just went along, and somehow I kind of got backstage access or something, and Dusty said, oh, by the way, this is Vicky Wickham. I went, oh, I really want to meet you, because I've got this band I want you to put on Ready, Steady, Go. So he said, well, come and meet me in London, and I'll bring the record. So I did, and then they went, well, we don't actually like the record very much, but we are looking for a TV presenter for a new sister show to Ready, Steady, Go. Now, this has never crossed my mind in a million years, really. I was just a little local journalist. So I thought, oh, well, sure, have a go. And that happened, and then, of course, that opened up all kinds of things. And you're suddenly there, and you're working with the Stones and Beatles and doing TV shows and stuff. And my whole life changed.
Quite, you're biting one another's knees and faces. And
He's eating Keith's foot, which is the most disgusting thing I can
They don't smell, folks.
They don't?
No.
They did when I ate them,
Don't you think one gets drawn into that whole sort of mainstream, and it's in a way like almost like psychedelic art happened, that it's become the whole new way. Oh no,
getting intellectual at lunchtime.
It's lucky we know her.
I can't get no satisfaction.
Any journalist, I think, that tells you that or music journalist, I should say, that says that they didn't get into it in part to get closer to musicians and find out what made them tick, to associate with the people that make the music is lying to themselves.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's a really important part of why we do this is because we're fascinated by musicians and we want to know what goes into the music and
well,
friendships form out of that.
Exactly, and it was such a brilliant time. And I think the wider story was young people took over television, magazines, and stuff like that.
People try to put us to down. Talking about my generation.
Before that, young people were just like grown-up children who expected to look and dress like their parents straight away. There wasn't this youth culture where, you know, we could do what we wanted. And that was brilliant. And I've never got over that, as you can see. And also, what I haven't got over is I want all succeeding generations to have that experience as well. I never thought of becoming a DJ. Didn't really exist. Didn't even think about it. But it's kind of a logical step if you're, passionate about music.
This is John Yoko, a trailer for the Pop Inside with Anne Nightingale, who will be twittering, and she will be playing some classic owner records, folks, the latest album and single.
Yes, we hope so.
We hope so. Please play it.
You know, one of the important turning points, I think, for the youth culture, as you put it, was obviously the Beatles, and their impact is omnipresent to this day and is powerful to people who own those records to this day. You got a chance to befriend the Beatles, and you spent quite a bit of time in the Apple HQ as well. You've talked about the trust involved in that relationship and letting you in.
Immense trust.
Take us further into that time.
Okay, well, I think with the Beatles, they were really good about letting you interview them and stuff, as long as you did not betray that trust. One strike and you'd be out, and that's fair enough. And also, I was trying to make it interesting. I thought, God, they're being interviewed every day. Asked really boring questions. So try and make this interview, and I'm still trying to do this, try and make it fun for them.
Yeah,
so it's not an awful chore.
I try and do that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, God, here we go, another boring question. I've been asked this a million times.
Designated paper today, the Beatles are dead, are they?
The Beatles he's talking about are dead. They've been dead a long time, The Beatles are dead, long live the Beatles. Every time, everything we do, every time we shaved or grew hair or made Sgt. Pepper or made the double album or made Hard Day's Night, the Beatles died and were reborn, So, of course, they died again, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah, but you're still making records, Abbey Road.
We just done Abbey Road, yes, right, and we've got the Get Back album, so we'll be sitting on our backs till we feel like coming out again, or doing anything again. And if we don't, we don't. If we do, we do, and let them all speculate about it.
Yeah.
Something in the way she moves.
George Harrison actually said to me once, "You were very good to us." I went, "What do you mean? You're the Beatles. I had nothing to do with it."
But that trust is important because who could they trust at that point?
I was just so thrilled. But so gradually built up this trust, and they realised, I think, that they could trust me, that I wasn't going to write anything horrible about them.
Annie, it is my job and duty as an investigative journalist to quiz you on one thing right now at this point, and I will preface it with a compliment in the hope that I get somewhere with this angle. You're a charming person, and that's a big part of the reason why musicians really like you. It's not just about the trust issue, but you're very charming. Is it true or is it false that Paul McCartney, for seriousness or otherwise, asked you to marry him?
Well, yeah, but I think he was joking.
You think?
Yeah.
That's a pretty ambiguous attitude to have. It's a pivotal point in someone's life.
He did, but he wasn't married at the time. But I was.
And Radio 2, Paul Hollingdale, stand by for switching. Get tuned to Radio 1 or 2, 5, 4, 3. Radio 2, Radio 1, go.
The voice of Radio 1. Just for fun. Music too much.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the exciting new sound of Radio 1.
Hi, it's Sarah Cox. I've got this amazing Radio 1 annual from 1969. It's a big hardback book. It says, meet all the top DJs and stars of BBC Radio 1 in the Pop Channel's first annual. And on the front, there's a guy with a big tash, man with a little Pomeranian dog, randomly. Oh, look, there's Tony Blackburn looking very young.
Yes, indeed, we've even got Ardle back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of the Tony Blackburn shows. I shall be waking up every morning except Sunday between 7 and 8:30. So let's away!
The idea of joining the BBC and also opening up the first pop station I found very exciting. And I was involved right from the word go.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the original DJs, well, Kenny Everett was one, of course.
You're tuned to your electric BBC.
I say, drummer.
Hello?
Can I have a roll on the drums, please?
Well, cool.
So was Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. JK. We're making it pay anyway.
He was a very strange choice for the BBC, really, because he was quite wild.
See, what's your story, Morning Glory? Ah, baby!
Dave Cash, he eventually joined as well.
Hello and welcome to the Dave Cash radio program.
And quite a few others.
And on this week's Top Gear we have Savoy Brown, Medicine Head and Renaissance, basically, and that's about...
First thing that strikes me, where are the girls? Where are the women? Where are the sisters representing? They ain't there yet.
It was the start of Radio 1, and the fact that there was no sort of female disc jockey there, I don't think any of us noticed at the time. But looking back on it now, it was a bit strange, yes. The thinking was that in the morning you had a male disc jockey there, in other words myself, and then later on in the morning it was the man taking the place of the husband that went out to work.
It's Annie Mac here. I am reading this article called Here Come the Girls from the Radio 1 Annual. Wow. Let me read some to you. Girls are all very well on TV, but looks are a side issue, with sound only. Somehow a woman's voice becomes monotonous after a while. Oh my God, that is incredible. And how is a woman's voice different from a man's voice? That's insane! Who said that? Or just a pop radio producer. Okay, we got more here from Trisha. Trisha explains, I don't think a girl comes over so well to the public. Vocally, I haven't got enough oomph, and I can't think of many girls who have. That's just bizarre. Wow, I'm sure it would be beyond most women, that knob turning and lever snapping, certainly beyond me. So the reason why this is slightly disturbing is that it's women not even thinking women can do it.
Radio 1 had, huge cultural importance, but back then it was a real boys' club. And I mean, a boys' club's one thing. People would say that, going down to the sports club after a match is a bit of a boys' club thing to do. This is outright sexism, some of this stuff. Some of these quotes are ridiculous. I mean, perhaps the truth is that housewives and teenage girls who turn to 247 in their millions don't want to hear another girl's voice in their ears. I mean, some of these things are outrageous.
Oh, it was worse than that. They said, disc jockeys are husband substitutes.
Crazy.
They're great.
It's down to me. Down to me, the change has come. She's under my thumb. Yeah.
You went from writing articles attacking Radio 1 for the standpoint to being the first female DJ on Radio 1. How did that happen?
Well, how it happened was because I think it was pressure, because there was mounting pressure on Radio 1 because of this blatant sexism. They had to take somebody on. And this is my kind of theory as well, as what I call the you'll do nipper syndrome, and the hang in there, be in the right place at the right time, but you might have to be in the right place for a long time before anything happens. Then began the real problem for me technically, because they kind of go, well, this does that and that does that, and then leave it gone with it.
Yeah.
Really scary, very scary.
How much ego, just quickly, how much ego over the years, especially in the early days, was there in the building?
All the male DJs had actually liked me because I used to write about them in magazines. When I actually joined them, I don't think they even thought of me as a threat, because they were too busy fighting among themselves.
We've already played All You Need Is Love by the Beatles, which is an important pivotal moment for you musically when we were talking about the Beatles before. We're now going to play a song by David Bowie called Space Oddity. Why have you chosen this song on this journey?
I went to see him at the Dome in Brighton, where you may have been. It's a big venue, it still goes on. And he was sitting on a wooden stool wearing jeans and a white shirt and playing acoustic guitar and playing this. And you thought, that's the future. Because when the Beatles broke up, everybody thought, oh, who's going to be the next Beatles? And they were looking for another group, another band. And I thought, no, it's him. And to me, he was. He was the most influential musician that we had over the next few years.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 2. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. Control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stopping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today, for here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can
This is the story of Annie Nightingale, one of the most influential and important radio DJs in the history of modern radio music, and Radio 1's first female DJ. We've already spoken about, hanging out with the Beatles and being able to see the future with David Bowie in it and how important he was as a musician. And right throughout your career, a constant has been that you've been really, really the sharpest blade on the cutting edge of new music, looking for the thing that is groundbreaking, that is exciting. And you've also had a chance along the way to interview and build relationships with lots of people and had good times with great musicians, We're going to get a few reflections on some of these people. Is it true that you bet Joe Strummer from The Clash of Cadillac that London Calling would reach the top 10?
Yes, London Calling was somewhere like number 15 in the charts, and then I was with The Clash in Brighton. I think I remember saying to Joe Strummer, I bet you London Calling goes top 10. And he said, I don't think it will. I said, I'll bet you anything. He said, all right, a Cadillac.
The ice is coming, the sun's swimming in, engines stopping it, the wheat is going.
And so at Radio 1 and the charts that week, and London Calling goes to number 11.
Oh, come on, seriously.
I think so, yeah.
Did you buy a copy yourself? Did you buy a copy?
Well, no,
You didn't buy a copy of London Calling?
No, I don't know, I had one,
There's still a Cadillac's on the line here.
Yeah, sure, I know. And so I thought, what am I going to do? So I've gone on my show that night and I go, look, I'm in this awful predicament. I owe Joe Strummer a Cadillac. What am I going to do? And to my amazement, a Radio 1 listener called in and said, well, I've got a Cadillac you can have for The Clash. I went, what? He said, it's not new. Does that matter? I went, no, it doesn't matter. I don't care how old it is.
So he gave you a Cadillac?
So, yeah, well, nearly. I mean, he arranged that he would bring it to Radio 1, and because he was a big fan of The Clash, and he would present it to The Clash, and we had a film crew there and all that. And then the guy called me the night before and said, two awful things have happened. A, I've just lost my job. And B, the Cadillac's broken down. I can't drive it to Radio 1. But he said, I'll put it on a transporter. Now, this guy's just lost his job, and he spent the money putting out a transporter to bring it outside Radio 1. So this happened, which is great. So here's the Clash. I wrote, OK, I owe you a Cadillac. Here's the Cadillac. And they went, oh, it's good.
I just love the fact that Joe Strummer held you to the bet just out of principle and then broke that at the end.
Yeah.
Would you have asked for the Cadillac if it had gone top 10?
That's a good. I've no idea. What would I have done with the Cadillac?
I don't know. You would. It'd be worth something now, I tell you.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison, true or false? Bit of an ass.
I thought so. Yeah.
Mark Bolan.
Mark Bolan was great fun. Oh, he was hilarious.
Hilarious.
Very, very funny, and he's take the piss out of himself, and he's lovely.
You went on tour with the Police?
Yeah.
I watched, just as a side thing, I watched Stuart Copeland's Everybody Staring movie of his Super 8 footage on the plane recently with the Police, and I was amazed at how, and this is going to sound awful, but just how kind of boring the whole thing seemed. They were on top of the world, like playing, and Stuart Copeland's like, so here we are, we're on top of the world, and everything's going great. Sting's still right inside. It's like, oh my God, you're the Police! How was it for you?
They had this idea to do this world tour, film this world tour, and do it for the Old Grey Whistle Test, which is the TV show that I was presenting at the time. But they wanted to go to places that bands at that time didn't go to. Well, Japan, yes, but Hong Kong. Nobody went to Hong Kong. India and Egypt. I'm incredibly privileged to be part of that. As soon as I arrived in Japan, it's like cameras all around their necks, especially Stuart. They loved documenting everything, and so they were always clowning about some of the video and having pictures taken forever and ever and ever and all that. And then we went to India, and I'd never been to India before, and that changed my life. And we stayed actually at that Taj hotel, the one that got taken over by terrorists in Mumbai a couple of years ago. So I was remembered every detail of that. And there was in the presidential suite, or the Maharaja's suite, there was a swing which held 2 or 3 people, and so we'd have a party at night, and somebody sat me between 2 of them and pushed me, and I thought I was going to come off this swing, but everyone was very drunk, and it was it was great fun.
And we'll get more on Eddie Nightingale's partying a little bit later on, listeners, as well, so stay tuned, because there's plenty more where that came from as the head goes down. Underworld as well, you've known them for many, many years, and we're about to play Res. Obviously, it's great to see them coming back with a fantastic new record. Lovely, lovely guys, and it must have been a really nice thing to have seen them develop over time too.
They were called Freur, but you were supposed not to say Freur. Their name was a symbol, but like when Prince did that.
Right.
And they wore red plastic suits. Honestly, were plastic or PVC or something like that, and crimped hair. And I went on tour with them.
I'm Carl from Underworld. It was 1983, and we had this mad idea of asking Annie to come and open for us on tour. We had this American 4x4, this big jacked-up Chevy Blazer. All of us would pile into this, and Annie in the front, and we'd just head off to gigs and ramble into town.
One day we were at Loughborough University, and they were on one bit of stage. I had another bit of staging where the DJ bit was, and I was going to play up until they went on, and I stepped across to say, "Are you ready, guys?" or "What do you want, 10 minutes?" or whatever. And I stepped into nothingness, and it was like Alice in Wonderland. I went, wow. I feel like I was falling down this bottomless pit.
We were in the dressing room waiting to go on. All of a sudden, the music went off, and Annie gets carried in through the door. And I'm not quite sure what the cause of it was, but she fell off stage.
Hit my back on a fire extinguisher on the way down. I wasn't all that serious, but they let me sit in the front of the van after that because I'd hurt my back. And they were great fun. They let me use their crimping things on my hair as well. And they were brilliant. And then it all went very quiet for them. They went to live in Bexhill, and basically they were starving.
We were back on the dole, no hope of any kind of record deal. And we'd just call her up for some encouragement, and she'd spend hours on the phone to us, just chatting away and giving us loads of encouragement and just being a good friend.
If I had known what they were going through, I would have said, "Come and live in my house with me," really, because people don't realise that before they became Underworld, they went through a very, very tough time. But they never told me that they were starving and penniless.
I remember taking me to one side and giving me a right ticking off, kind of saying, "You never told me that the gas was cut off and you didn't have the money for food, because I'd have invited you around and cooked dinner for you." And we could have been living at Annie's house. I'm not sure, how she would have felt about that. This hairy Welshman living in her house.
Then when they became Underworld, I was so happy for them because they all went, woo,
and for good reason.
So.
Oh man, this song we're going to play right now that you've chosen is one of my all-time favourite pieces of music, and I could listen to, 13 minutes and change, 10 minutes and change of this easily every day for the rest of my life. This is Underworld and Rez. So we're talking to Annie Nightingale, and we're tracing some fantastic steps along what's been a wonderful journey up to this point, and continues to this day, from fantastic radio DJ and a great lady. You know, you've been through glam rock, you've been through prog rock, you know, you'd been through the 60s, you'd seen music come and go, and you're still keeping an eye out for exciting things, and then punk rock came along.
Music had taken a turn. It had gone it's called pomp rock. It had become very pompous, people doing very long, boring guitar solos. And all these new bands, they couldn't get a look in. The record company's like, no, we don't want you. They wanted yes, and more yes, stuff like that. This is where the Great British Street Rebellion comes in, and you get this grassroots rebellion, and so punk happened. It was a DIY thing, and they thought, okay, we don't care, we'll make our own records, we can't play properly, we'll go and play somewhere, and they did.
Hello, I'm Reckless Eric on Wonderful Radio 1. I suppose I should say hello to Annie. The first time I met her was in 1977, and she just seemed so glamorous, you know, as well as being who she was and everything, and I was absolutely awestruck, so I could hardly speak. She'd been playing my record, my first record. Yeah, she played Whole Wide World every week, it seemed. She got so many requests for it, they had an investigation. I was asked by, like, you know, bosses of the record company and distribution people, and had I been sending in requests.
When I was a young boy, my mama said to me, there's only one girl in the world for you, and she probably lives since I 80. I call the whole wide world, I call the whole wide world just to find her. Or maybe she's in the Bahamas, where the Caribbean Sea is blue. We've been in a tropical moonlit night because nobody's told about you. I call the whole wide world, I call the whole wide world just to find her. I call the whole wide world, I call the whole wide world to find out where they hide her. I call the whole wide world, I call the whole wide world just to find her.
My name is Gary Manny Mounfield, ex of the Stone Roses, now of Primal Scream and Freebase. even before the radio, I think I was more grown up with Annie through the Old Grey, the Old Grey Whistle Test, when she was on that, and where you got the non-manufactured, non-bubblegum bands, you know. They've had such a roster of great acts on there. Whispering Bob Harris and all that, you know, it's a legend of a programme.
Hello again, it's good to be back with you after our summer break, and I'd like to say just a word of thanks, first of all, to all of you who voted us once again the #1 television programme in this year's Melody Maker poll.
That was the zenith of musical broadcasting in Great Britain, you know.
The Whistle Test to me was Bob Harris's show, and I used to watch it every week.
Hello, it's time to whistle a happy tune again, and the people with us to do that tonight are Graham Nash, a studio session coming up later on.
Bob met Sid Vicious, Sid's mate, in a pub one night, and it all kicked off, and I think Sid's mate glassed Bob's mate in the face or something, and so Bob really was not not keen on punk at all. He walked away from the show, so they said, would you like to take it over? I went, yeah, I've got no problem with punk, I'm enjoying it, you know. And so I probably changed the show, because obviously, you know, you do. And I was always not taking it too seriously, slightly taking the piss out of people as well, in the nicest way. But because, you know, I didn't want to be overly overawed. Again, you want to make it fun for them.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Whistle Test. On tonight's show, Kid Creole and the Coconuts, in place of the Gang of Four, The Fix.
When Spandau Ballet, I introduced them as the first band ever discovered by hairdressers. And I stood like, in front of them to say that, and behind me they were all kind of miming, combing their hair. And I thought they'd kill me for saying that. But, you know, I think it needed some kind of little angle on all that.
Soho fashion scene in late 79, and could be said maybe the first band ever discovered by hairdressers. Their gigs were small work.
Just remember thinking it was great that there was such a strong female personality involved, you know, in the very macho male-dominated world of music and broadcasting, you know, and she's a real standout figure in that way, you know. She's the grand dame of British broadcasting, isn't she now?
That was a very rich time. It was sort of just punk had happened. You were now into sort of new wave things, all kinds of very interesting music going on. Really good.
I'm Nick Rhodes, at least I believe I am. I formed a band called Duran Duran when I was a teenager. Annie was there through the whole new romantic thing. She was right at the edge of it and embraced it all. We'd all sort of watched Whispering Bob or Annie every week on the Whistle Test thing, and we got asked to perform on it. And for us, this is where we'd seen David Bowie and Roxy Music and all these other acts that we admired when we were kids. And so to be on it was really quite something. And when we did it, Annie was presenting.
Mostly it's been a London-based scene until along came Duran Duran from Birmingham, who are, they admit, to closet musos and more into the music than dressing up. After 2 hit singles, they've now released their first album, and we persuaded them to whiz up the M6 to be with us in the studio tonight. The first number from them is Night Boat, Duran Duran.
We were actually incredibly nervous because, again, we'd grown up on Top of the Pops and the Old Grey Whistle Test. And these were the two big shows, and that and getting played on Radio 1 were the 3 things that you needed to do to have any sort of chance of having a career in music at that time. She was very supportive of Duran Duran. We went on her show. I remember we did some round table things with her, and she would always play something when we weren't sure we were going to get any radio play. We were not exactly what everybody else was playing at the time. Our second single that came out pretty much flopped. I mean, I think it just about made it into the top 40. There's a song called Careless Memories. I think she played that because she wanted to stick with it because she'd heard the record and she was interested in it. So I'm always grateful for anyone, anywhere along in our own career that has been supportive because they've cared about something.
Perfect time for you to change position at Radio 1 and move on to the Sunday Request Show. This ran for 12 years.
Yeah.
And
I was only supposed to be on for 3 months. I kept thinking that Radio 1 was going to take it off because it was too weird. and that we were getting away with too much, and the listeners sort of, you know, they took it over. It's their show, as it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But they actually would come up with really good ideas, and the more good music you play on a show, the more it encourages more people to listen.
Hugh Ray says, oh, it's a lovely compliment here. He says, "You are the best request DJ on Radio 1. Thank you, Hugh, but let's think about this. How many request DJs are there? One.
DJ Hyper.
I always remember on a Sunday evening when we'd be sitting down to Sunday dinner and the top 40 would finish and Annie would come on at 7, I think it was at the time. I enjoyed the music more than the top 40, I remember that. I'm sure she used to play stuff like the Talking Heads and stuff like that at the time.
Now, I've got to play this for a spaniel that I met late last night. Well, we were looking for this party, you see, it's been a long story. And it was in a big mansion block, and no one could remember the numbers, so someone, who wasn't me, rang every single bell in the block. It was probably only about midnight or something. Anyway, this really nice bloke came out and opened his door, and he said, "Well, can you play a record tonight for my dog?"
My name's Andrew Weatherall, sitting in a dark, dingy basement somewhere in East London. I just remembered it being a broad church. It's very Peel-esque in its appeal, maybe not quite as extreme as John Peel, but as wide-ranging and educational. I remember hearing Eddie and the Hot Rods, like live at the Marquee, I think, a track she played from that, and I remember grabbing my mother's Bone Shaker bicycle out of the garage and cycling down to Revolution Records to buy it, and I think that was due to Annie.
Why don't you ask them what they expect from you? Why don't you tell them what you are gonna do? You'll get so lonely. Maybe it's better that way. It ain't you only. You got something to say. Do anything you wanna do. Do anything you wanna do.
So here is the anti-Womble top 10, which I hope reduces all Womble lovers to tears. 10, Womble Trap, Boomtown Rats. 9, Womble Lands Burning the Ruts. 8, To Cut a Long Womble Short, Spandau Ballet. 7, Poisoned Wombles, the Lambrettas. 6, Womble Corrosion, Sisters of Mercy. 5, They Shoot Wombles, Don't They, Racing Cars. 4, Heinz Beans and Womble Burgers, old TV ad. 3, Never Take a Womble Alive, Spear of Destiny. 2, Throw All the Wombles Out with Your Bath Water, Tempo Tudor. And number 1, The Day They Shot All Wombles Down from Joan Baez. Oh, how cruel.
She was a legend in our house. I remember back up in the Midlands, first time I ever heard the whole of one side of an album being played was on Annie's show. It was on one Sunday afternoon.
Underworld's Carl Hyde.
It was one side of Tangerine Dream's Rubicon album, which, if anybody who knows it in vinyl, is only 2 sides. That's it, it's just 2 tracks. And she put this on, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And it went on and on. I thought, no, you're joking. And like, 20 minutes later, 25 minutes later, the album finished, and I thought, she's a god. That's my kind of radio. It left a deep impression on me, to the point where Underworld made tunes that were 20, 30 minutes long because of things like that.
Neil Murphy from Moorside, Palmers Lane, Millham in Cumbria says, Sunday night simply wouldn't be the same without the sound of your little voice prattling away in the background. Prattling away, thank you.
There was no email, there was no text number, there was no phones. People had to mail in their requests, which led to some pretty interesting...
Oh, they did, yeah. They sacked
ways of getting
week.
Noticed.
Yeah. Somebody sent in a request on a brick, a house brick, with a stamp on it.
On the brick.
Anything to gain attention. I think a banana had that. Lots and lots of things. But it was fun and fun, really. Duran Duran fans were amazing because they would always write their fan club number on the bottom right-hand corner of their letter.
Proper commitment.
Please would you play, whatever, say prayer word.
The Duranis, as they call them.
The Duranis, and they would be standing outside Radio 1 all the time. Very high-profile fans. I thought they were great.
So did the band.
Yeah, we used to call them the Duran Annies. A lot of our fans used to wait outside of the BBC because they knew that we'd end up there. Annie was always very good to them. She'd always talk to them and say, oh, they're all downstairs, you should go down and have a chat. And, oh, there's only 30 of them out there. I'm sure you could sign those now, couldn't you? And she had a real fascination with them for some reason. I do remember that.
Moving on the floor now, babe, you're a bird of paradise. Cherry ice cream smile, I suppose it's very nice. With a step to your left and a flick to the right, you catch that mirror way out west. You know you're something special and you look like you're the best. My name is Rio and she dances on the sand, just like that river twisting through a dusty land. And when she shines, she really shows you all she can. Oh, Rio, Rio, dance across the Rio Grande. I've seen you on the beach, and I've seen you on TV. To all the billion stars, it means so much to me, like a birthday or a pretty view. But then I'm sure that you know it's just for you. Her name is Rio and she dances on the sand, just like that river twisting through a dusty land. And when she shines, she really shows you all she can. Oh, Rio, Rio, dance across the Rio Grande.
BBC Radio 1.
Night with Annie Nightingale.
Right, first message is coming in on the Chill Out Zone this morning. Hi to Tony and Ivan, who are chilling out in Brixton. They want to say hi to Lisa in Coventry, and they say, we will get some sleep soon. Oh, no, you won't. Hi to the people in J Block at Clifton Campus, who are getting red eyes, and the message to you from Quinton is, lightweight!
Hello, I'm Rob, the bank. Long before I even thought of having a radio show, then, you know, Annie Nightingale's The Chill Out Show was an essential kind of weekly listen. It was, you know, I'd always tune in. Obviously, it was the days before the iPlayer or Listen Again or anything, so you actually listen to radio live, revolutionary. Annie's amazing mates with all these rock and roll people from, like, Manny and Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream, so she always has these crazy stories of her rock and roll life and just playing the most brilliant music.
Well, this is quite a chilling track. We don't have too many chilling tracks on the Chill Out Zone. That's just the name of the show.
I'm Sarah Lowe. There was a group of us that used to answer the phones for Annie, and I named them the Pussy Posse. We'd get people like Andy Weatherall and the Chemical Brothers phoning from the motorway when they were driving between gigs, and these were people that we socialised with, so we would have a little chat with them on the phone and then talk about where they were going to be DJing next. People driving from one pub to another, you know, miles, absolutely miles, and just chatting on the phone and partying in the car and asking for particular requests for songs. You know, it was kind of a party atmosphere.
Manny from Primal Scream.
It's something I'd be listening to on the way or coming home from somewhere, you know. I always would tune in because it's really finger on the pulse when it comes to new styles of music and giving it a chance and embracing it, you know.
Right, I'd like to say hi to John Paul from Corby, who's partying at somewhere called Spread Eagles, who says a big shout to Phil, his friend, and to his girlfriend, whose name is forgotten. What do you mean? You've forgotten your own girlfriend, so this is not good. Not at all.
This is, I think, quite a critical and crucial moment in your journey. You're in charge of a very successful request show on Radio 1, hugely popular amongst the audience and the musicians, and I think it's at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, you decided to really commit yourself to the music.
It was because of Acid House. Acid House came along, and to me, and it still is as important as punk was. And I don't know if everybody knows the story of what happened, really, but, you know, 3 guys went on holiday to Ibiza, and they heard some DJs mixing, you know, Chicago and Detroit house with guitar music, and clubs that stayed open all night. They were on holiday, and they came back from holiday with keep their T-shirts on, their shorts, and thinking, let's carry this on. And we can't go to a club because clubs won't let us do this, so we'll do it in a warehouse. And we'll just get our mates along, and raves started happening, and then it just grew and grew and grew and grew, and that generation went under the wire, and it was, to me, it was incredibly exciting.
Manny from Primal Scream.
It was a revolution in music, you know. You know, the 60s happened and you had the psychedelia and all that kind of stuff. Then in the 70s came punk rock, and then in the late 80s, that, you know, that was our punk rock moment, is the Acid House movement.
Andrew Weatherall.
Been going to clubs since I was about 12 or 13. Acid House was just the next step of going out and dressing up. I was obsessed with clothes and going out. At the time it was just, oh, it's nightclubs again, excellent. I can wear fancy trousers and have silly hair. Acid House and being on the dance floor at the Shum or any of the early Acid House places where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face for smoke. It was the most ultimate of the moment feeling I've ever had. But at no point when I was losing the plot on the floor of the Shum did I think, this is an important part of English social history. I must remember this, because I'll be talking about it 20 years later.
This is Radio Freedom.
KLF is gonna rock you. This
wasn't just about the music, you know, there's a lot of creativity inspired by going out, getting off your noggin in clubs, you know, and a lot of people have made great careers from that era, and having someone like Annie championing you and giving you a chance. You know, there was only really Annie and John Peel who would even consider playing your music, you know. You wouldn't hit the A-list or be on daytime radio whatsoever. You didn't have a chance.
Naughty, very naughty.
Again, it was like British youth culture coming up, you know, of its own, doing its own thing, and I mean, it caused an awful lot of problem with the government because people were drinking water and they were not drinking beer, and the breweries were going crazy because all these young people were going and having raves in fields and were not buying any lager. You know, there was government legislation to stop it, but it hasn't really worked. People still have raves, you know.
And, you know, it hasn't worked on you either, because this moment in your life has continued. You have been immersing yourself in all forms of club culture ever since that moment.
Exactly. But the thing was then, up until then, you know, the bands have been the thing. Now the DJs were the king. And, you know, the DJ in a field with, you know, a generator decks playing 12-inch vinyl white labels.
Got any salmon?
You know, and everyone go, oh, what is this tune?
So exciting.
There were 500 copies in the world. That's all.
Amazing.
And you go crazy to hear what Andrew Weatherall was going to play that night.
Just what is it that you want to do?
Well, we want to be free. We want to be free to do what we want to do. And we want to get loaded. And we want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do.
Oh, wait, baby, let's go.
We're going to have a good time. We're going to have a party.
People like Primal Scream, it was the perfect balance between club and rock, and you've had bands like Primal Scream who have walked that line their entire career, and you've chosen Loaded from 1991, a pivotal musical moment for fans and also for you as a DJ.
Well, also because I was living in Brighton, they were living in Brighton, and we were going out clubbing all the time, you know, and they'd been this sort of jangly guitar band, and basically, I mean, stories that they met Andrew Weatherall, and he said, I'd really like to do a remix of what became Loaded, and they went, oh, go on then.
I think I'd been in the studio once before, so I went in and was reasonably polite with the track. You know, I hadn't learned the art of destruction quite yet. I did a version, and Mr. Innes said, yeah, no, it's good, but, you know, rip it apart. Just do what the hell you want, and did that the next day, and it worked.
It became Loaded with all the samples in it, and that, you know, that to me, that was a pivotal moment, yeah.
What is it that you want to do?
I'm gonna get deep down, said. I'm gonna get deep down. Woo, hey!
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
when you look at what Andrew Weatherall did with the Screamadelica record, there was like a sea change in white independent guitar bands embracing more dance beats.
I remember Daft Punk saying to me that you know, Screamadelica and Primal Scream stuff was their jumping in point to acid house, because they'd been in a punk band before. I think that's what that record was. It's a perfect bridge from the world of rock and roll into the world of acid house.
It was the Scream moving in a different direction, the Roses moved off in a different direction with the Fool's Gold thing. Annie was a champion of all that. You know, when you get such a renowned DJ on side, and she's a fan of your music, then it's half the battle won. All you've got to do is come up with tunes, and then you're guaranteed to get them played nationally, you know.
A night with Annie Nightingale.
BBC Radio 1.
Justin, Chris and Henry in Ringwood called to say they're chilling out with their beers and little pick-me-ups.
Right, it's you and me partying till 5 a.m. this morning. I'm trying very hard to be sort of chilled, but it's difficult when you just come on air.
Pete Townsend from The Who.
She was the first cool person that I knew that moved to Brighton. She set it up. She established the scene. She did without question. I remember going down to this party. She had a kind of a pop art flat. It was painted the most extraordinary, garish but tasteful colours. There was another woman who, with her husband, lived in the same kind of manner, and that was Janet Street Porter, who is now, you know, quite a respected and considerable figure. But they were both colourful, powerful, charismatic and attractive in different ways women, and who you really wanted to be with. And that was the significant kick-off for Brighton. And after that, I remember thinking as we were driving back, I was thinking, wow, you know, we should get somewhere in Brighton. It's beautiful.
Alex Patterson of The Orb.
My strongest sort of like memories of Annie was probably a party down on Montpellier Road in Brighton where she managed to get two of her friends to hold record decks because the floors were wobbling so much and the records were jumping everywhere. They were actually holding the record decks while everyone else was dancing, and I was DJing while they were holding the record decks. I thought it was quite admirable. I think it was the party that went on for 7 days. I wasn't there for all 7 days, but I felt it was pretty rammed in there at that time.
The 6-day rave.
It was the Liberation Party. Yeah, that was a party that lasted 6 days. That was in my house in Brighton. We had, I think, Andrew Weatherall turned up 2 nights late, actually, but it was still going on.
I just love the fact that I've turned up for a 6-day party 2 days too late. I remember the event, but the details are a bit sketchy, and the only one detail I can remember, I'm really not going to broadcast on national radio because it would hurt so many people you wouldn't believe.
I remember I came to Radio 1, did my show, went home again, still going on. People moved around different parts of the room. People go out and go top-ups, crisps and all that. And a whole lot of people from Aylesbury, the Aylesbury posse, went out on the Sunday afternoon, left the front door open. And we had all this, you know, very rented gear and lights in, and oh God, you know.
Annie, how do you end a 6-day party? When is enough enough?
Well, I think that only when the hardcore people had left. I remember the one guy who was left, who was called the Archbishop.
Something tells me he's not an archbishop.
No, he's not. But he used to do very good impersonations of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And when Primal Scream won the Mercury Music Prize, which they lost the cheque on the night, but they got the Archbishop rehearsed to do their acceptance speech for them. And he'd be wearing Doc Martens, fag hanging out of his mouth, with an Archbishop hat on. And he was like one of their gang, great fun. So I think he was the last person left at the 6-day party.
Andrew Weatherall.
I imagine the first time I actually heard her DJ in the flesh was probably round someone's house, probably our own. You know, I do have a vision of her in a rather splendid Georgian house in Brighton, on her knees amongst a pile of discarded vinyl and CD covers, with an intense desire to play everything at once.
It sort of makes sense that associating with a lot of great talented DJs, musicians, producers at this point, that you would inevitably find a place for yourself in clubs to DJ, because that was obviously going to present itself and you were into the music.
Well, the thing is, I had done DJing before in clubs and I had absolutely hated it. You'd be judged by what kind of car you turned up in. You were a Radio 1 DJ. Some Radio 1 DJs gave money away at gigs. They would make, they would
kind of missing the point of work there, isn't it? Sort of missing the whole point of capitalism there, I think.
Yeah, or they would give you a mic on a long lead and expect you to be, comedian or something.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, don't worry about the records, love, we'll play that. Okay. But I thought hired me to come and play the kind of music I play on the radio. That was horrible, and I was no good at that, and it was misery. And I mean, you say, well, why do you do it? Well, everyone did it for the money, to be honest. So I really hated all that. Now, once Acid House happened, and the whole role of DJ completely changed, and you could play all this stuff, and I now was in a situation I wanted to be like Andrew Weatherall and not speak. So I remember going to do a gig in Wales somewhere, and some bloke came up and said, have you got any music played by real musicians and real instruments? And I went, no, mate, sorry. And I didn't speak. So I was Radio 1 DJ, but I came to these gigs and didn't say anything. And trying my best to learning how to mix, which we all know is very, very difficult. I have great respect for people. It does not come... Somebody said to me, it's all about coordination and confidence, neither of which I had.
With me here is Annie Nightingale, the Radio 1 DJ who was driving in the race. Annie, were you the first lady?
Oh, yeah. This is Radio 1. So I tell you in case you didn't know. I'm Anne Nightingale. I actually haven't found out really what happened yet.
We shall keep you posted on that, Annie. In the meantime, let's listen to Neil Sedaka.
Back to life, back to reality, back to life, back to reality.
You've had great success, though, travelling the world DJing and being a part of all sorts of things, Radio 1 associated and otherwise, and you've been to some incredible parts of the world, and I'd love to get some reflection on a few of these. I'm desperate to know what it was like to play in Baghdad.
That was my best adventure. What happened there was I was sat in on a meeting at Radio 1 and somebody said, oh, we need someone to go to Baghdad. So I went, oh, I'll go. I didn't know where it was, really. I just thought flying carpets or something. And then somebody said, are you mad? They're at war. I had no idea about this dictator whose pictures were everywhere. Saddam, the concerned, the dad, with pictures of his kids, or Saddam relaxing. There's so many pictures. You thought, how's he got time to be a dictator? He's always having his picture taken, being paid for painting. If they'd known I'd ever been a journalist, my life would not have been worth living. Because they regard all journalists as spies, which they are really.
Yeah.
And all the time I was a DJ, I was fine, but I wanted to know a lot more. It was a very extraordinary experience.
There's a story about the Total Eclipse rave as well, which we have to get.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, I was in Brighton one day and I heard somebody say there was going to be a rave at a Total Eclipse in South America, and I thought, I've got to go. One of those, I've got to go, got to be there. Nobody knew what country it's going to be in, and I thought I could make a film of it. So I was trying to find who will help me make a film of it. It's very difficult. It took months of persuading anybody. And also, it was like a rumour. Well, where is it going to be? Oh, well, we don't know. There's some woman in Frankfurt who was booking DJs to go somewhere, but it was either going to be in Bolivia or in Peru, because you go where the totality is the best, and you go where the least likely to get cloud cover. And so the best place was 3,000 metres up in the Andes, in a place called Putre, on the border of Bolivia and Peru and Chile, and that's where we ended up going. We got there with, I went with a comedian called Phil Kay, there's a Scots comedian. He was the co-presenter, and it was extraordinary experience, because I realised that after all that time, I didn't even know what to expect. What happens? So the moon covers up the sun, so that's it. It's actually an extraordinary experience. It's like probably being in the middle of a hurricane, or it is very moving and very emotional experience. The party was at the bottom of the mountain, and there was a lighthouse, which was the light show, and it worked because it was a lot of German techno stuff, really. And the lighthouse light went round and round to the music, and that was a light show. And everyone was just so excited to be there. And people had gone from all over the world to be there. I wouldn't miss that for anything. Then you become an eclipse chaser and you want to go towards them.
BBC Radio 1.
Night with Annie Nightingale.
At this point, dance music had to change. And French house really was a huge pivotal moment for dance music, I think, and Daft Punk in particular. They brought a different kind of, creativity into it, a bit of mystery, and the music was flawless. What were your first impressions of Daft Punk before we played the funk?
I'd had this white label. I can see it now with just Daft Punk on it. And I, at the time, was doing a residency at Gatecrasher in Sheffield in the back room, which was hilarious. And I used to play that every month, or however long it used to go. And I was playing it on the radio, and people would get in touch with me and say, I've got to have this record. I've got to have it. And I think, yeah, but you can't, because there's only probably 500 copies in existence anywhere. Then I thought, what about do a compilation and put all this stuff on the compilation that people can get hold of? This was no YouTube then. There was no iTunes. It's very difficult to get hold of this stuff. You'd have to wait and hear it once a week on the radio. And also, I couldn't play the same tunes every week. So I talked to Heavenly Records, and we put together a compilation that put Daft Punk by Daft Punk on it. And then, I'm not saying as a result of that, but they did become huge, yeah.
Thomas from Daft Punk.
When Daft Punk came out on Soma, I can remember people from Soma in Glasgow telling us about DJ Girl playing, in a version of DJ Girl playing Daft Punk heavily on the radio, which was back then in around late 95. I have no idea how she got in touch with our music, but I guess she's quite up to date with what's going on in the music and very curious, and got in touch with a copy of the record, which was not really big at the time, and somehow played it on the radio, which was very cool.
I've been the one to partake until the end, looking for the after party to begin. I'm going down to La La Land. I hope to see you soon in La La Land.
Annie Nightingale, we're talking to Annie right now. It's the 40th anniversary here at Radio 1. Has it gone? Must have gone by like that.
Yeah.
It's a moment to reflect, and you've been really generous with stories, and it's an incredible listen. I'm loving it. But of all these firsts, you know, hanging out at Apple Records, you know, going to these raves, being part of the old grey whistle test, being, you know, pivotal in the establishment of establishing, you know, dance compilations. You won an MBE, and then you got Caner of the Year, and I've heard that is your biggest accolade, Caner of the Year.
Oh, it was great, yeah. I mean, it was fun.
Annie won Caner of the Year. Wow.
I do remember getting that, but I didn't know that it was the same year she got an MBE, but that's a brilliant story as well.
I didn't know that, but, you know, that's good for her.
Robbed a bank.
I don't know which came first, the Caner of the Year award or the Queen giving Annie the MBE, but it's a lovely image and a lovely juxtaposition. I like the idea of the Queen sat there in a off-yellow cardigan by the fire with the corgis round her ankles singing, yes, Annie Nightingale, she's done extremely well, let's give her the MBE, and not actually reading the music press and realising she was Caner of the Year too.
As regards getting an OBE or an MBE, that's we were with her that night, myself, my wife, her son Alex, at a party at her flat, and I found some photographs of me fondling it last night, because I'm never going to get one, am I?
My name's Ben Turner, former editor of Music magazine. At the time, Clubland in the UK, you had these larger-than-life characters like Charlie Chester, Dave Beer from Back to Basics, and we just thought that they deserved to be celebrated. They were kind of characters of our scene. So we introduced the Caner of the Year award.
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And I think at this time, Annie was always seen stumbling around nightclubs. She was just everywhere. Everywhere you went, she was in Ibiza, she was at award shows, she was at club nights. Unlike Dave Beer and Charlie Chester, she was there, I think, for the music and for the love of exploring music, while still being very hedonistic at the same time. We didn't know at all about the MB at the time, so I think it was a beautiful, beautiful accident that it happened, and as always, Annie was in the right place at the right time.
I asked the organiser, I said, go on, why was that then? Are you sort of taking a piss or what? You know, and they went, well, no, they said, everywhere we've been, you've been there. It was really about being... It wasn't about necessarily passing yourself completely unconscious, business. They meant you were out and about and you covering the scene. It was very nice. It was tongue-in-cheek and it was lovely. And there was never another one. The music, the magazine folded, I think.
Yeah.
And so I was the last Caner of the Year. There wasn't any more.
You've also been the last female DJ to ever be given an MBE up to this point.
Only one, yeah.
Yeah. What does the MBE mean to you now, today?
Well, I remember actually I was at Radio 1, opened this envelope, and I thought, oh, yeah, you have been invited. The Prime Minister says, do you want the MBE? And I actually thought, very paranoid, thought, oh God, I know what to do. What do I do? So I'll go and ask John Peel, because he'd had OBE. So I went, John, I've got to speak to you about something. Don't tell anyone, it's very secret. I can't tell anyone. Look, I said, been offered this. What do you think? He said, I should take it. He said, if you don't, nobody will know, and then you'll sit in the pub one day, and the subject will come up, and you'll go, oh, well, I was offered one of those, but I didn't take it. He said, go and have a day out. So I did. That party, that was a party to remember. It was May Day, it was the 1st of May. And it happened that May Day demonstrations in London were for people to protest about the environment, a lot of things. The party was going to happen in a little bar quite near Radio 1, or invited Radio 1 to come along in the afternoon. Suddenly, the whole of all these demonstrators were being kettled, as we all know the term is now, into Oxford Circus, up Great Portland Street. The whole of Great Portland Street was a mass of police with riot shields and horses. It was just like a complete mad war zone.
Punk legend, Reckless Eric.
I was at the MBE party. I went along to the party and they said, look, I've got to go because it's the demonstration, I've got to be there. But it got involved in a baton charge at one point. It was weird. There were men on horseback, you know. It was like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I ended ended up in this other street, and there was a line of armed policemen, you know, policemen with shields, facing away from me at either end of the street, and I was in this street alone. And I realised it was the street where the party was going on.
The head of Radio 1, Andy Parfitt, said, I'm going to have to cancel the party. I went, you can't do that. What do you mean? I was in tears. He said, because we can't risk Radio 1 people getting caught up in this. I said, but once they get in the door, we'll be safe, we'll be all right. And like Basement Jacks were coming across London to play. And I said, I can't stop them. I haven't got their mobile number. I can't stop them now. The whole of London was in complete turmoil.
I got back into the party, and Annie said, where you been? I said, I've just been out there. There's the baton charges and that, and I was all a bit battered, you know. And she said, right, I'm going out there, and she went out there. She was quite lit up, and she got lifted by the police, and they said, right, you, and they shot her off and put her in the back of a van. All the other people, like the radio, you know, the BBC people, go, oh God, they've got Annie in a scandal, and like they had to go, you can't take her, she's just got the MBE.
Party gal. It's Party Gal of the Year, it should have been.
She could definitely keep up with the best, that's for sure. I mean, we endured a few late nights, I think. She's very functional, Annie, very practical, so she'd probably stay up till 4 or 5 in the morning and still be on air.
You can't live on without you. You can't live on without you.
A Night with Annie Nightingale.
BBC Radio 1.
You talked about going to John for advice, and you've done that a couple of times in this interview, and at crucial moments you went to John for advice. And obviously, you know, most sad of all, John's no longer around and passed away. And it's someone that you obviously really miss. We all
miss him terribly, yeah.
And a real kindred spirit for you throughout your career. Someone that was always there to lend a hand and some advice.
Yeah, and I honestly think that I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for him. I don't think they've let some loose cannon stay at Radio 1. Had he sort of set the template for allowing people to play strange music and be a bit, you know, a bit the way he was, and but he was also very, very courageous.
Little surf music, as I Like You, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, Lee Perry, Hunters and Collectors, Personal Column, Deutsche Amerikanische Freundschaft, Luders, Birthday Party, French Impressionists, The Mad Professor, Meat Puppets, Sunny a Day, and to start the programme, Dead or Alive.
At the Breaksbowl Awards 2007.
Live upon the Radio 1, you see me? Yeah.
Annie Nightingale Show, we just won again. Thank you to everybody who voted for Annie Nightingale Show's best radio show for the second year running at Breaksbowl Awards. I'm near speechless.
You know what? You've been so instrumental towards club culture. And, you know, you've really immersed yourself in one particular genre of club culture up until recently, which has branched out into more like the sub-bass thing. But for a long time, it's been breaks.
Yeah.
And I think breaks is kind of the unsung hero of the club culture. It's given us some of the most exciting sounding records, some of the best programming, best ideas, and yet it's never really attained the same level of perhaps commercial crossover as, say, house music.
No, they never. Well, no, they couldn't handle it. See, you could feel them going, "Oh, we can't sell out. We can't sell out."
Yeah. How's it been to be a champion of the genre that won't sell out?
They've been the most brilliant people. They've got a great sense of humour. They don't take themselves too seriously, apart from what they wear in their T-shirts. Very important. What a great bunch of people. This is what I couldn't believe.
I'm Adam Freeland. The moment my relationship started with Annie is she booked me to play in Paris at this event she was doing as part of Radio 1. It was like a live broadcast. And we just hit it off, and we had some awesome utopian conversations about how we were going to change the world. Annie was the first radio DJ to pick up on what we were doing. And we started fusing the sort of drum and bass lines with the West Coast electro thing. We'd launched a club night called Friction, which Annie was a regular at, basically, and she came DJ'd.
My name is Lee Rouse from the Plump DJs. Annie was one of the first big supporters of our music around sort of 1999, 2000, back when we were working with Frescanova Records and the Freestylers, Cut and Paste. We were putting on parties in London, and suddenly there just became flocks of people and listening to the sounds that we were playing, and there were other promoters like Paul Arnold from Chew the Fat and Brixton, and Rennie Pilgrim and Teo and Adam Freeland putting on breakbeat parties of their own, on New School Breaks parties, and we suddenly realised that this thing was bigger than what we were doing, and it was actually growing very fast.
I don't know how Annie first heard what we were doing, but she was so excited about it. Seeing someone with that sort of a musical history and such a rich history like Annie, so into, then at the time was a real sub-genre, you know. She was totally sure about it. She's like, this is the future. And she just committed to it. She became the high priestess of breaks.
Well, recently you talked about, you know, the kind of hybrid culture that could only, I think, exist in the United Kingdom, where you have all these different types of producers and DJs banding together, following all sorts of influences, and all of a sudden out pops dubstep.
We're so lucky to have British youth culture. You don't have it. I was looking for it in Baghdad. It doesn't exist. Yeah, so many countries don't have what we've got. This, you know, extraordinary business with dubstep and grime is so exciting. And again, it's come from grassroots.
Adam Freeland.
Annie was the first person I heard playing dubstep on Radio 1. I mean, I'm sure there may have been other people, but, you know, she's always been on it.
Professor Green.
The thing with Annie is that she's still completely up to date with music, and although she's a breakbeat DJ, she's championed a lot of new music and still continues to champion new music. You know, she knew about me before a lot of people did.
This is Simon here from Drum Sound and Bassline Smith. If you listen to any of her shows, you'll play a mishmash of all styles. The one thing that they've all got in common is generally it's going to have a heavy bass line. People like Subfocus, Chasing Status, DC Breaks. She supported people like Jakes, Benga, Scream. She's even supported, you know, a lot of grime artists and kind of hip-hop artists on her show.
Me, I ain't really commercial. I just want to make grams by the dozen. Put the fresh pies in the oven and rate them my rivals, and they don't owe me nothing. I'm a best. What's my name now?
Really, her show now is based around bass music.
Annie Nightingale. Bigger bass lines.
Drum and bass. Now, that sound, you'd never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, when reggae happened, you'd never heard anything like that either. So, unique forms of music, and to be treasured, you know.
Yeah.
And get very excited by. I don't know, these islands seem to be kind of, I'm not being waving flags at all. And I think it's actually a very multicultural thing that's brought it about, particularly in East London. This collision of cultures that's really, really worked, you know. I feel so thrilled that we're here, you know.
I'm just thrilled that we can play the Beatles and David Bowie and Primal Scream and all these amazing legendary records with fantastic stories attached, and we can include Drum Sound and Bassline Smith.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Come on!
Come on, clap with us.
thing about Annie is when she gets behind the track, she's very, very excited. And I can remember driving home and putting Clap Your Hands on, and she was singing. I couldn't see her, but it was as if she jumped on the tables in the studio and started jumping around and singing and clapping your hands to this track. And the energy that she kind of brought over the radio about the track just like made myself and Andy, drum sound and bass, like, made us feel really kind of like honoured that she was into the track.
Drum sound and bassline Smith, clap your hands, and God, I mean, there's so many other stories I want to ask about, you know what I mean? I get asked this question an awful lot, you know, in a roundabout way, sometimes in different words, and I can't think of anyone better to ask it to. What do you think makes a really great radio DJ, a great broadcaster? What are the qualities that you look for, you think are important?
Someone tells the truth. First and foremost, I think it's about honesty. To me, it's as simple as this anyway. It's like you phoning your mate up and say, I've just heard this tune, I'll play it down the phone to you. I said, see what you think. To me, it's that simple. It's someone who's talking one-to-one. It's an intimate, very intimate medium between you and the listener. You can't fake it. I think people can spot straight away if you're saying something you don't mean. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to play the music that you love, I mean, that's the whole point of doing it to me. I mean, I wouldn't do it if I couldn't play what I wanted. I walked away from day one. It would have not interested me. That's what interests me. It's like that enthusiasm saying, I heard this tune, what do you think? Hey, look, have a listen, you know. And building that excitement. We're really not that essential, are we? I mean, we just play other people's music. You could say, you know, we go, that was, this is, coming up next, you know. We've been written out many times. People say, oh, there's going to be these radio stations where everything's automated. There's no need for DJs anymore. And you know, years ago, you thought, oh, well, that's it, we're all out of a job now. And that hasn't happened. Hopefully, if you're a specialist DJ, people will kind of trust you, build up a trust with them, that they know that if they come to you, that you play them something that they might like.
That is certainly the case with you. And your career is testament to one very single-minded, very driven dedication to music, and music that you love, and musicians that make it, and the audience that want to hear it. Thank you, Annie Nightingale. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Zane. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Yeah.